Then let's go actually to a couple of pages. So I'm going to bring up my default page. Okay, on this default page, I have a user control called Web Page Header. Okay, and then on page 2 here, I also have my Web Page Header. Now you notice how this other info here is also kind of positioned somewhere else, isn't it? Okay, this is what I was talking about with a div tag. All right, so I don't know if you guys know about that, but basically it's just a div tag here. Okay, I actually set up a class called div tag position. So in my style sheet, here's my div tag position where I set up the left as 125, position is absolute, and the top is 100. Okay. I always try to use classes whenever I can. Okay, instead of hard code, I don't want to hard code the style element right there, right? You know, try to set stuff up as classes. It makes it a lot easier to change, because that way if I change that one style, it's going to affect all of my pages, because all of my pages were using that same div tag with that same class. Okay. So let's go ahead and run this project now, and we'll take a look at what this user control expands out into. Okay. So what it expanded out to was it added this image, it added my menus here, and it added the menus over here, which is why I had to have the div tag there, is to move everything over, didn't I? Okay. That's why I positioned these at that exact place. Okay. So then if I hit this, it goes to page 2. Page 2 is also positioned at the same location. So what that one user control did for me was give me a header and a left nav. So let's take a look at this, this user control. And I think it was called Web Page Header. Well, Web Page Header is actually made up of 2 other user controls, because I wanted one just for the header piece and I wanted another one for the left nav. I wanted to kind of get them separated a little bit. So again, I'm breaking things up into little constituent pieces. I don't want one big behemoth control. I want one that just includes 2 other guys. Okay, so inside of here, what I've done as well is, again, used some div tags. Now these I went ahead and hard-coded here because it's just on one page that I'm ever going to use these things. So I've got 2 additional user controls. So the top one is the web page menu. Okay, and this is the one that has my image on it. It also then has this data list here. Okay, this is a data list control. What happens here is I wrote some code now behind this user control. All right, so that's one of the beauties of having these user controls. You can actually make them like, they're little pagelets. In fact, they changed the name. In Beta 2, they were called pagelets, which I thought made a lot more sense than user controls. Okay, but that's, you know, that's not my call. So what I did in here is in the page load, in that user control, the web page menu, I simply build a data set. Okay. Now in this case, I kept it kind of simple. I didn't want to go out to a database and all of that. So I just basically dimmed a data set and did a read XML method here and read in some XML. And I've got a little XML folder here, and here we go. Menu header, there's some XML, right? Not a big deal. Then if I maybe, you know, add another menu, you know, we'll call it the Ken menu, and Ken calls page2.aspx as well. So just by changing that XML file, all right, this data set reads that in and binds that data source to that data list. So if we run this again now, okay, there's our Ken menu. Okay. So just kind of a neat little trick there. You know, you don't always have to go to a database, right? You know, sometimes having these local XML files is really kind of nice. I mean, why have that extra overhead of going out to a connection maybe? You know, that XML file is local to the web server right there. If it's something that doesn't change a lot, you know, you could cache that thing up, which on a menu would probably be pretty appropriate. Okay. So then what happens with this data list, okay, is I've actually bound it so that when you click on one of those items, it invokes the item command. Okay, I've set them up as link buttons, so I actually dim a new link button, grab the command name here, and put it into this session variable, and then I redirect to the next page, which in this case is page 2. Okay, the reason I put this session title in there is because when I get to the left nav page, the left nav page also has a data list here. Okay. And what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to grab the title that we just clicked on at the top menu, right? And I'm going to use that to actually figure out which set of rows I want to display on my left nav, because my left nav XML, when we look at this, actually has everything. Okay, it has home, a couple of them for home, a couple of them for services. Right? So when I click on the home menu, I just want those first two menu items to come up. But you can see how many I have in here. Now, if I want to add Ken in here, right? Okay, I didn't make a schema for this, so it would be pretty simple to do. Okay, but what I would do is add a Ken title. Okay, and Ken we'd put ASP.NET on. Same thing, all right? So now, I've now just added a left nav for that new Ken top menu. So when I click on that, we get ASP.NET. So again, going back to the code here, in this left nav here, what we do is we grab the title. I again dim a data set and read the XML. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is grab the default view from that table that gets created when you read the XML. I'm going to grab the title and set the row filter. Title equals whatever title I grabbed that I just clicked on. Set the data view as the data source to that data list, and boom, I'm off and running. But that's really nice, isn't it? Because by wrapping things into a user control, I can use this on every single page. And if I want to change the implementation of how I build the menus, I only have to do it in one place now, don't I? Okay, I mean, in this case, I'm using XML. Maybe later on you decide, I really want the flexibility of a relational database. Just come in here, change the code, your whole site changes. Cool. All right, so some pretty good uses there for user controls. Now, one thing, and again, another tip. You've probably noticed this, but if you ever remove a user control from a page, it leaves little user control turds in there. Okay? Basically, it leaves the register tag. Here's what happens. If we actually go in here and we take a look at the default page, for example, I've got a couple of user controls in here. Every user control you add, it adds a register tag. So here's a register with a tag prefix. Okay, well, the problem is if I remove this user control, if I hit the delete key, it removes it from there, but it does not remove it from here. The register tag stays around. Okay, so that is something. Make sure that you are cleaning up after yourself. Also, I'm going to show you this in a minute, but if you've set a particular variable, if you actually go in and actually dim a variable to reference that control, that does not get deleted either. Okay, so a couple little tips there. All right, so why user controls? What's the big deal, right? The advantages are they're very easy to create. You can copy and paste around. You can expose properties, so you can pass things from one user control to another, one page to a user control. You can expose methods. You can even raise events from user controls. The disadvantages of these are you must copy from one project to another, okay, to be able to reuse them. All right. If you want to reference their properties or methods, you have to declare a variable. You actually have to go in and make a reference variable to point to that guy. And removing the control does not remove the register tag. So again, let's go back to our project here, and let's go into the name and address here. Okay. So here I've added, and I did this very badly. This is just a demoware here. Okay, I just made it a couple of public variables here, okay, to expose them as properties. Normally you'd write the property statements, right? But if I want to reference those properties from a page, okay, I can't just get at them. So let's go over here. Actually, let's do this. Let me add a new web form. Let's drag our name address on. Okay, so, and I'll give it a name here. Okay, NAMADDR. So if I come in here and I actually do NAMADDR dot, it has no idea what I'm talking about. Because these are not like a server control. I mean, when you drag a text box on from the toolbox and draw it on, you get a variable created, don't you? Protected with events, all of that. That doesn't happen here. So what you have to do is you have to actually create that here. Now, this shows up as a class in your IntelliSense. Your user controls show up as a class. Because just like everything in .NET, it's also a class, isn't it? But you have to declare a new instance of it. Once you've done that, now you get everything that you wanted, right? Remember I had ADDR equals, some value there. And I also had the, what else I had? Name, right? Yeah. Okay, so those did get exposed as soon as I added that line of code. Again, if I go and delete that user control though, right, what's going to happen is it's not going to remove the register tag and it's not going to remove any of this code. Okay, good. All righty.